with what I'm doing on screen, and that'll work as well. Okay, so how I like to start my drawings, or how I'm going to start this one anyway, is by starting with a composition kind of like box that I want to contain my work within. So I'm going to do that by kind of going parallel to the edges of my paper, and I'm going to leave about an inch of space, just using the edge of the paper as a guide. I don't personally mind if it's not like a perfectly straight line. If you do mind, you'll want to use a ruler for this step, but I think it looks kind of nice to have a natural edge that's just like generally straight. Also, you probably want to, while you do this, keep your lines pretty light. I'm going to be pressing harder so that you guys can see, but if you can keep your lines a bit lighter, then it's easier if you want to make corrections later. And we'll be doing some techniques that do require things to be erased. So just keep that in mind. So I'm going to look at my Bluebird reference, and I'm going to start with the head. And I want to keep in mind its relation to the box that I've created when I think about how big I want to make it. So I'm going to have my bird on the side here, and I'm starting with a round shape, kind of a semicircle for the head, okay?
Yes.
And then you're going to notice on one side, I'm carrying it down a bit further, and I'm still keeping it round, but not as like rounded as the top. It's going down more, but not perfectly straight. So we're still rounding it a little bit as I come around, okay? And that's because the bird's body comes down like so. So if it helps, you can also go ahead and complete the circle. I think we should just, I'm just gonna go ahead and mute, if I can, some others. If everybody doesn't mind just muting yourself for now, and then if you have a question or something, feel free to unmute yourself. That way we just don't have the background noise. Thanks so much, guys. Okay. So I completed the circle. Just as a general guide, it can be helpful to do that so that you can kind of see where the head is versus the body. All right, now I'm going to continue with the body. So starting halfway through the circle on the right side, I'm coming down and angling, again, rounding up a bit as I angle downward here. And that is going to be where the bird's wing comes in. I'm going to complete that wing shape by coming around the other side and swooping inwards towards the bottom of this wing. And then I'm just going to go ahead and connect them like so. Okay. Now I'm going to bring this body around in another semicircle shape, okay? And then instead of completing the circle, I'm going to come down to meet it. And then I'm going to join the bottom of this little corner we created to the bottom of our wing, like so. So you can see we're just laying down the basic shapes to start, and then we're going to build with more detail and stuff as I go. All right. So next I'd like to give him a cute little beak. And for that, we're going to do a little triangle shape. It's an isosceles triangle, meaning it has two longer lines. It comes out pointed, whereas one is shorter, right? So there we go. And you can go ahead and draw a line through that as well. I'm going to have my line a little bit closer to the bottom half of the triangle. come right through to meet that point. And now we have 2 little triangles. Okay. Next, I'd like to give him an eye. And for the eye, I'm going to use this nose or beak as a kind of guideline. So I want to come out from the center of the beak towards the center of the head. And then I'm going to create a small round eye, like so. And just to add a bit of realism to the eye, I'm going to create another smaller circle within it. And that's going to be for our highlight. So I do that smaller circle in the upper right corner. And then I'm going to color in around it. I'm going to see in the chat, I see some people are saying they don't see anything to download. I'm just going to see if I can see it. Yeah, I don't actually see it either. Click on the JPEG download in the chat. I'm not sure. Emily, if you're there. Yeah.
Renee says that she can see it, but on a laptop. I can just, is it okay if I email it to everybody and then I have everybody's emails from this and then you can see it? Is that okay?
I think so.
Okay. I'll send an email to everybody just in case.
Okay, cool. I'm gonna carry on. So you guys can just keep following. These are just the basic shapes. So after you lay these down, like I said before, we're just using the pencil for that reason. So you can always make changes by looking at the reference and altering anything. Okay, so next I want to add the shape for the tail. And the tail kind of comes down and the feathers like group together in a way that it makes kind of like a scalloped edge shape to it. So I'm going to come down on an angle towards the bottom right of the page and then create a slight semicircle shape for that little scalloped edge I was mentioning. And I'm going to do 2 of those and then come up to meet the top like so. Okay, and then now is where I'm gonna start adding some details. And to do that, I'm gonna start by erasing the bottom of this circle. All right, so I'm going to start on the left side here. And if you can see the reference, you'd see that he has like a blue head, top of his head. So I'm going to kind of come in and start to establish that. At first, just with this kind of wiggly line that I'm doing. Come up like so, and then we can come in and add to it with like little wisps for feathers. I like to indicate feathers by doing lines that kind of taper off, and to achieve that I start with a more firm pressure of my pencil and then I lift up really quickly, so I'm barely even touching the page. And when we come and do this again later with the pen, it's going to create a really nice feathered or tapered look to it that adds a bit of realism. So I'm going to do this following the shape of the feathers here. I'm just going to show you again. So coming down, I can kind of follow this shape that I drew and just add some extra little lines to it. Okay. I also want to come around the eye and just add some details in here. So I'm going to do a mix of dots and little lines around the eye to just add some of those details that the bird has that I think are really pretty. I'm also going to draw the other side of the beak, which kind of comes in another bit of a triangular shape, like so. We can connect that and erase the line where our original semicircle intersected with that. And you can see how just that little difference in the beak really makes it look more realistic. All right, so now I'm gonna keep going and I'm gonna add some little lines along here for texture. I'm gonna break up this wing as well because the wing on the bluebird is blue. And so I'm gonna draw a faint line here to go along and then doing that same trick. Another thing I like to do when I'm trying to create feathers is think of it as like a grouping. So if I start with this shape, for instance, another kind of rounded triangular shape, if you guys can see that, now I can fill it in with another few lines that are all pointing towards the center. And it kind of creates this look that has like more detail than you actually put into it, if you understand what I'm trying to say. And when you follow the shape and form of the bird, consider that while you're doing these little indications. That's really going to help to make it look more realistic as well. So if you take the time to study a bird, you'll notice that feathers tend to group together and they make patterns. So to get those patterns, I'm going to come in and cut across the wing, going diagonally down. And then I'm going to cut in with lines. And these lines are all going parallel to one another. And they're going diagonally as well. So you can do a few of those. If it gets confusing to do too many, you can simplify it and do a bit less. All right, so I'm gonna try moving my camera a bit closer for you guys to see. And hopefully that helps. And then I'll also just give the lens a bit of a wipe just in case. Let me just grab a towel. Okay. Okay, so now I'm going to, along the bottom of where these lines meet the first line that we drew, I'm going to create a little scalloped edge. So like little semicircles that meet the corners of each intersection. Right? And then later, I just won't draw, when I go in with the pen, I'm just not gonna draw that line, that first line. I'm only gonna go and do those little scalloped edge. All right, and then I want to break up this bottom section, and I'm going to repeat that process within these two shapes. So keeping in mind, I want these lines to come to this corner, and I want these ones to kind of come towards this corner. And now you should see your bird is taking shape. The details are coming together. Okay, I'm gonna, for the tail, it's falling just behind the body, right? So I'm going to go across the top of the tail. This part has kind of curved over, so you would still see a bit more light on that section. Whereas underneath, I'm just gonna go ahead and lightly shade so I remember that section's going to be darker. So keeping this little lip up top white. Sorry, I think I lost my eraser. It's just checking for it. Okay. So next I'm going to put in our little legs. And for those, they're going to angle a little bit towards the left. I'm going to do 2 lines here, and then another 2 not too far away. And then before I do our little claws, I want to start with my branch. And for the branch, I want it to kind of curve up and over to the left. So I'm going to do just that with my first line, bringing it up and over. And then I'm going to do a line on top of it and bring that down to match. Okay, and then if you want to add some details to make it look more realistic, you can add some notches along the edges. And from those, we can create some little leaves growing or flowers. If you look at the reference, they have these cute little bell-shaped flowers. So I might do just a couple of those. There's a ton in the reference, and you could follow that if you like, but for the sake of time, I'm just gonna do a couple. So for the bells, I'm coming down with that semicircle shape again, and I'm gonna elongate it a little bit. And I wanna come down past this line. I'll erase that after, or I guess I could erase it now. Let me just find my eraser. I just had it, but fell on the floor. And I'll erase that. Okay. And now along the bottom, it has a little circle, semicircle in the center, and then we're going to connect with these half circle shapes along to the edges. Like so. So we can do a couple of those. I'm going to have a couple coming from the same little branch there. And I think that's cute. I'm going to do one more along the bottom here. And I don't like that it's so close to the edge, so I'm going to come back in and just raise that up a little bit. Something that's good to keep in mind when creating art is like points of tension in your concept, or composition rather. So if things cross over one another in the edges, that can become like a point of tension. So that's why I wanted to come past this edge over here, and why I don't want to quite meet the edge of where I laid my initial rectangle down. So I'm almost done adding details in pencil to my bird. Next, I'm just going to add some more little feathery indications with these lines. I'm keeping them slightly rounded, doing that technique, trying to keep a firm hold at first and then lifting off. And you can just consider where you want to add a bit more shape to the piece. The bird also has a little bit of white underbelly, so I'm going to come along the bottom and do that technique. I like to do one longer swoop and then a few lighter swoops, or shorter, smaller, next to it. And I find that that kind of breaks up the texture and makes it look nice and a little bit more realistic. Okay, so you can come through, do a little bit of additional lines wherever you want to just see a bit more texture. I like to have some of them go a little bit to the left, a little bit to the right, and I find that that also helps to just keep that look of realism going. And soon, we could probably show each other where we're at so far by switching to gallery view. So I'll give you guys a couple minutes to keep going if you need. And then I think it's always kind of fun to show our progress. So we'll do this once now, and then once more, maybe at the end or maybe after we ink.
Hey, Frannie, there's just a question in the chat that just says, can you explain what point of tension means?
Yeah, so what I mean is by keeping a firmer grip on your pencil at first, so like pressing harder with your pencil and then releasing that grip to have it kind of come to a point. So by the point of tension, I just meant like pressing harder at first and then releasing. And if you do that kind of quickly, you get these nice little like tapered edges. And you can even practice, like if you have a scrap piece of paper, I'd recommend, you know, trying that out, trying to loosen up a little bit in the way that you do it at first can really help with like your confidence when you go to do it on your original drawing. And actually, I think we can, we'll jump into the inking process first and then show after that, because I think it'll show up better on screens after it's been inked. Sorry, I'm just grabbing my tools, but here. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and start that process. I'm really just going over the lines that I've already drawn here. And I'm just using a basic ballpoint pen. If you have like a nice artist pen, that's great, definitely use that. But I just want to show that you can really do this with whatever tools that you have. So I'm just coming in, laying down these lines. Whoops. With the pen, where I want to put some shadow, like under this tail, what I'm going to do is some hatching. And hatching is just repeated lines in the same direction that can help to create form and shape in your drawing. So for these lines, I'm going to go in a diagonal direction that would kind of mimic the shadow cast by his body. And I'm just doing these repeated diagonal lines to fill the shape from edge to edge. And notice I left the lip up here as its original color of the paper. Okay, now I'm going to continue just adding these lines with my pen. I'm gonna add a little bit of shadow on the underside of the beak, again with that hatching. Just gonna add another line. It's not quite touching the middle entirely for a little bit of detail. So I didn't quite come to the corner. I just added it in the center. I'm coming along the edge of the head, doing some of those little wispy bits as I go. You don't have to do that. If you prefer it to be a cleaner edge, you can aim for that. I think it's nice to sometimes do a mix, maybe a longer line, a couple little feathers poking out here and there. So, okay, it's okay now, but just make sure, guys, we're muted unless we're asking a question. Okay, so I'm just going over some of these little textures lines that we did. Again, keeping a firm grip at first, tapering off with a barely touching it as I lift my pen off the paper. Doing a mix of, you know, one longer line to define the shape, maybe a few shorter ones that go a little bit left, a little bit right. Those small details can really pay off once it is closer to complete. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and work on this eye. So to do that, I'm going to go around the outside first. Now I'm gonna go around that smaller circle we created once more, and the top right or top left, it doesn't really matter where you put it. And I'm just going to color it in around that highlight. Whoops. Okay, so maybe don't erase that quickly when you use that much ink, but that's okay. I'll just add a little bit of texture around it, and might go in with a gel pen to get the highlight back later. Okay, I'm gonna add a little bit of texture along the top, following that curve of the head. And I'm gonna do my little feathery wisps along the top of this wing as well. Something I didn't complete doing before was the legs, which I'm just going to go ahead and do with the pen. But if you feel more comfortable, you can switch to pencil. So I'm going to come out. They have like 3 main joints, kind of similar to our fingers. So I'm going to come out for the first joint and then come down. And it's the third is going to curve around the edge of the tree. Okay? And if this confuses you, take a look at your finger and think about how that would curve around a branch, right? Now I'm gonna follow that shape. So we have the first one angling out. The second one downwards, kind of going parallel to that edge of the branch. And then the third is just gonna curve under and disappear. Okay. Now for the talon that's going behind the branch, this one's going to curve upward, and then this part along the top will just disappear behind the branch. Okay, so I just curved up, and then I went up a little bit, about the same thickness as the first talon, and I came down to meet that corner. Okay, now for the third one over here, I'm gonna come out again, down, following that same pattern we did initially, and under. Okay, and then I'm just gonna come up and connect that to the bottom. This one is coming out of this little shape I have here. Just added it to define it a little bit more. So I'm going to come out a little bit. I know I drew my first one over here, but I'm just going to adjust that a little bit to match this shape. Okay, so this is kind of like his like thigh or leg socket. I don't know what you would call this on a bird. From there, I'm gonna go ahead and continue with that shape of the leg. And then we're going to, for this leg, his talon is gonna be coming out a little bit more straight. And then it disappears under the bottom here. So we don't have to worry about where it would go under the branch. Okay, I'm coming down with another second talon. And for the third, it's going to be disappearing behind the branch. So I'm just gonna come out like so on a diagonal angle towards the right. And that one disappears behind. So you only have to worry about the one side because you're not seeing the other side of it. Okay, and then if we want to add a little bit of detail, I'm just going to shade in the right side a little bit on each. Just going lightly with my pen. You could do the hatching technique as well, just those repeated lines. And I'm just doing this along the right side / the bottom side of each of these talons and the right side of the leg. And you can see that just adds some nice lighting to it. Makes it look a little bit more dimensional. All right. Lastly, I'm going to put a little bit of shadow underneath this wing by just doing that hatching again, the repeated lines going downward. You don't necessarily have to do this step. I just think it is nice to separate that wing a little bit, give it a bit more dimension. Now I'm going to go over the edges of our branch. Something I find can be helpful is to try to like loosen up your movements. You know, being really stiff can sometimes cause like rigidity in your lines. So if you're finding like it's difficult, you can switch to another piece of paper and just get loose with your movements. See what happens, and you might feel more confident, and you can be more deliberate when you come back to your drawing. It's nice when you don't have too many extra lines. Although I definitely have some of those right now, that's okay. I think an important thing with drawing sometimes is just seeing it through, because it can be really easy to get discouraged when you start something and you realize how difficult it is. You might be thinking like, oh, I'm never gonna get there, this looks like crap. But there's always, you know, phases in each drawing that you do. And I think seeing it through to the end, you'll be like, oh, you know what, that was totally worth sticking it out. And even when it doesn't work out, then you learn. All right, so that for me will just about conclude the inking. I might just add a couple little leaves on here by coming down like so. Just adding little leaf shapes to the top of these can be nice. All right. And you can also add any little lines going parallel to the shape of this branch. So I'm just following the shape of the branch. You can do some that are shorter and some that are longer. And naturally, it will just emulate the shape or the look of like bark, the texture. So I just did some lines longer, some I like to kind of twirl around like so. Especially if there's a knot, it can look nice if you add like a little squiggle in there. And then just remember to do variation. As long as your lines are varying in their direction a little bit, in their size, their shape, then it's going to look a little bit more realistic. I find that really interesting about nature is that there's so many patterns, but there's those slight differences are kind of what makes it look most beautiful. Because if you do too much of a pattern when you're trying to draw nature, it doesn't look right. It looks off. Okay, so I think now would be a pretty good time for us to share where we're at. There's 15 minutes left, so we can just do a preview and then we'll get straight to coloring. And I think that'll be pretty fun. So if you go ahead and switch to gallery mode, then we'll be able to see everybody's drawings side by side and just take a moment to appreciate how everyone can follow the same directions and come up with, you know, these different, beautiful, unique drawings. Wow, guys, I love what I'm seeing. These are awesome. These are so great. Thanks so much for sharing these, guys. I love it. Awesome. Okay, so with that, I took some screenshots. I hope you don't mind. If anybody didn't want their work shown, Emily will let me know the screen. Those are awesome though. Really beautiful work I'm seeing.
Yeah, just let me know in the chat or verbally if you don't want your face or your work shown online. We have like our Instagram that we might be showing these on, but if you don't want that, that's totally fine. Just let me know.
Awesome. Can I also just get you to mute any background?
Yeah, I can do that.
Cool. Thank you. All right, so I'm gonna get started with adding some color to this piece. And this can always be a really fun way to just like liven up your drawing. You can also stop here if you'd like. That's totally fine, but I think I'm going to keep going. So I'm going to start with yellow. It's always good rule of thumb to kind of start with your lighter colors because you can always go darker later, but it's more difficult to go back from that. Also, now is a good time to erase your pencil lines before you start coloring. If you were just drawing a second ago, you'll want to give it a moment to dry so that you don't smudge it like I did earlier with this eyeball. And I'm just gonna retape down, probably not wobble as much. Okay, so oops. Now that I've erased this, I'm going to start coloring in my background. For my background, I want to do yellow. And with your pen, if you're using pencil crayons, it's good to keep your lines going in the same direction to start, and start light. It's easier to build up your color and it will like have much better payoff in the end if you build it up by just gradually using your pencil lightly in the same direction than if you immediately press really hard, because what happens then is you can damage the paper and it'll stop taking any more color than what you already have there. So I'm just going around the bird to start. I went all the way to the bottom on the bottom half, but on the top, I'm just going to go about the same distance out as there is between the bottom of the bird and the bottom of my border. And then I'll transition into another color. And I like to start with my background first, just like I would if I was layering in a painting. It's good to start with what's furthest away when you're coloring or when you're drawing, and then work your way to those things that are closest to you in the image. And I'm going to be going through this really quickly. I encourage you guys to like take your time with it, especially if you're really into what you've done so far. If you're feeling like a sense of accomplishment, take your time with this process. While I'm not going to stay and spend a whole lot longer, you guys totally can once this is turned off, and it's so rewarding to be patient and see what you're capable of. So now I've switched to orange, and notice I'm starting not directly from where I stopped with the yellow, but above it, and then coming down into the yellow and overlapping a little bit. And I'm gonna really ease up on my pressure. So going lighter as I come into that yellow, and that's just gonna help to create like a nice blend or gradient. If you're using markers for this, what you can do is just come down with that orange and then use the yellow as kind of a blender to go over the seams where they meet. I also think it really helps if you like scribble it and don't have a completely perfect edge to it. Like if your edge is completely straight, then you're gonna have a much harder time tricking the eye into believing that the two are blended. So if you guys have any questions, feel free to unmute or leave a question in the comments, and I'd be happy to answer any tricks with like blending markers. But I definitely find pencil crayons are easier, so if you have them, I'd recommend them. So just for the edge of this, I'm going vertically to kind of get that line down, but I want to keep it horizontal to match with everything else for the most part. Okay, so I'm just speeding through this for the sake of time, but you guys can definitely take your time with this process, enjoy it. And you can go back and forth as well. If you're having a hard time blending, you could switch to your yellow, overlap the orange a little bit. Again, making sure to ease up on that pressure, go lightly where it's overlapping, and that will really help with the blending as well. If you go over the edges a little bit, that's okay. I think that's actually better than leaving a little bit of white space, because you can always color that in. But if you have like a white gap, it's gonna immediately like stick out. So I'm just going along this bottom edge and adding a little bit to that gradient as well. Just going lightly with my pressure, starting from the edge and coming up always. Okay, so what this has done is it's created a really nice focal point, which is the bird in the image, because that's where this yellow is like radiating outward from. So it also creates a nice like ambient look to the piece. And if you want to add to it, you can always come in with your yellow and go over lightly in some areas. And this creates that kind of like out of focus, you know, varying background look. I'm gonna keep it mostly in the center though. That's just to give you guys some options. All right, so now I'm gonna move on to the bird. This is gonna be pretty fun. I'm gonna start on the left side with some yellow. Coming along here, I'm gonna go along the bottom edges of these textured shapes we put in. And just go ahead and cover them in some yellow. Because it's our kind of lightest like highlight color, I'm not afraid to go over larger areas with it. And then I can come in and close in around them later, and it'll actually look nicer and more like organic. Okay. I'm also going to come across the top edge of these wings, just like so. And then finally, I'll put a little bit along the top of the beak. So just kind of peppering some yellow here and there throughout this bird. now I want to switch to my blue. So I'm gonna come in with the blue and start just shading, going lightly with my pencil, following the shape as I do this of the bird's head, of the lines that we put in earlier, and making sure to go around the yellow to start.
Hey, Frannie, we just have one question.
Yeah.
Somebody just said, can we mix medium, like crayons, pencil crayons, etc.?
Yeah, definitely you can. I will say that sometimes because of the waxy residue that pencil crayons leave, your markers might not go over top of the pencil crayons as well as you'd hope. What I'd recommend is do a swatch test on a scrap piece of paper first to see how that works for you, because definitely like different materials behave differently depending on the brands and other variables, your paper, things like that. So yeah, just make sure to test it out first, because I wouldn't want you to ruin your piece or have something not go as you planned and then be upset about it. So I'm just coloring in the head here. And what I'm gonna do is that same technique we did earlier, where I come in with a firmer pressure and then ease up to a tapered point. And I'm doing this following that shape of the bird's head and making sure to leave some gaps in between that are lighter. And this is really going to help to just create that textured look and a little bit more realistic coloring job. And this layering can actually still work for markers as well. So if you were using markers, you could go over it once by quickly just going in the same direction across an even distribution of color. And then you should be able to layer at least once on your paper, and with the same color, it'll darken when you do these little textured pieces. Okay. Next, I'm going to continue with this blue, and I'm going to go along this first section of wings and just lightly color it in. Then I'm going to go along one side of each wing and darken it. So I'm going along the underside, of each wing and just adding another layer, going firmer on my pressure to darken that. Okay, and then I'm going to repeat that process in these other sections. Really light at first. I'm gonna go ahead and add a little bit of a shadow by coloring just underneath that scalloped edge first. And then repeating that process, just going along these lines, just one side of them with my pencil crayon, darkening that up. Okay. I'll do it again here. Darkening, adding that shadow. I'm going to add a shadow underneath this grouping as well. And then just darken those lines. And to also help differentiate your shadow, you could come in with the orange or with a brown and go over that shadow with that color as well. And that'll help to just separate it from the blue shadow of in between each feather grouping. All right, now I'm going to color in the back of this tail, just going over the whole thing with an even coating of this blue. And then I'm going to go over that with the orange as well. And the reason I'm using orange over blue is that they are complementary colors. Together, they create brown. And so on top of one another, they create a natural shadow color. Okay, and then I'm gonna go along here with a little bit of yellow along the top of this tail, but I do want to separate it from the background because right now it's blending in. So I'm gonna go along the edge with this lighter blue that I have. If you only have one shade of blue, you could totally use the same one, and that would be fine. And that just helps to separate that edge from the background. Okay. And next, I'm gonna come in with my orange, and the bluebird has like a kind of brownish orange underbelly. So I'm gonna start with the orange, and I'm coming in where we did these textured spots, and I'm kind of just going over them, leaving the centermost sections with more yellow, because that would be where the light would hit most. Okay, so I'm coming along the bottom here as well. Again, easing up with that pressure as I lift my pencil is going to help create like a natural tapered, feathered look to it. And I'm going to go ahead and then just lightly color in this white space with the same orange pencil. I'm leaving this bottom section, however, the color of the paper for now. Okay. Next, I'm gonna come in with a brown. If you don't have a brown, you could use the blue again for this, or a darker red or orange. You can get creative with it for sure. It's gonna be fine. But I do have a brown, so I'm gonna go ahead and come along this bottom section, following the shape of the bird. And just adding a little bit of shadow into the bottom of these textured sections, kind of coming around it, not going through the center so much. That also helps to just further the illusion of depth. I'm going to color in under this wing to accentuate that shadow. And again, you guys can take your time with this, but I'm going to speed it up because I know we are about 5 minutes over time now. So my apologies for that.
No worries on my part. It looks really great.
Thank you. Okay, cool. So next I'm going to color in this branch with my brown. I'm starting out by going light with my pencil, and then I'm going to go over some of those textured lines, focusing on the ones on the bottom. And I'll show you why. That's going to help to also create an illusion of depth and of light. So I'm going to start by going over my lines, pressing a bit harder. With my pencil, where we did those lines of texture. And then I'm going to go in and layer up just along the bottom half of this branch. And it gives it the illusion of a shadow and dimensionality by just going along the one side on the bottom, following that shape as I do. And then you can, press even harder just along that bottom edge to really seal the deal. Okay. I'm gonna add a few lines of my brown in the bottom for texture around this white section, but for the most part, I'm gonna leave that the color of the paper. And then finally, we just have our little bell flowers here. And for those, I think I'm gonna stick with the kind of theme of colors we're using so far. So I'm gonna start with yellow and go along the right side of each flower, slightly centered, but to the right. Okay, and that's gonna be like a highlighted portion. And then I'm gonna start from the edges of these flowers. You can go a little bit firmer with your pressure, but not too firm for this. And then go really light as we come towards that yellow and just kind of gradually ease that in. You can do like slightly circular motions, going really light with your pencil crayon, and that will also help to create this like natural kind of gradient. They look almost like they're glowing. Just going really light as I come towards the center here. If you have green, you can use that. If not, you can layer the yellow and just go really light with the blue. And that definitely works. I have green, so I'm just gonna quickly color these in. The little leaves as well. And then finally, I'm going to go color in with my brown just along the bottom of his talons, his little bird feet. I don't want to use too much because I still want them to look different from my branch, but by just adding a little bit of color in spots here and there for shadow, I think that helps so that, you know, it still looks complete. So with that, I'm adding a little bit of brown to the bottom of this beak. Then I'm gonna add some orange in the center. And that concludes my drawing. I would love to see what you guys created. Wow, I already see Leah is on it. That looks beautiful. These are really great so far. I'll ask you guys to just keep it up while some people join in with their drawings, and then I'll take a screenshot of everyone's. I love this. Great job, guys. Oh my goodness. These are gorgeous. Love it. Ooh, I see some people did their own thing, and I loved seeing that, the different use of colors and applications with watercolor. I'm seeing, you know, markers, everything. Wow, those are really great. Thanks so much for joining us today, guys. I hope that, you know, this was a fun way to kind of break up the usual routine, you know, do some art and connect and see some other friendly faces. I know it's always my favorite part to see what everybody created. So thanks so much for taking the time to show.
Everybody, I really love seeing what everybody created, and congratulations on all your creations as well. Thank you, Frannie, so much. This was such a good workshop. Really looking forward to seeing everybody's work. If you'd like to send it to me, I put in the group chat that you can just send it to me at emily@scarborougharts.com, and we will be posting this video tutorial for other people to enjoy as well. And if you'd like to be a part of that post on our website, I'm happy to feature your artwork as an example. So please send it to my email when you get a chance and with your consent as well. But otherwise, thank you guys so much for being here. We have one more Community Connects workshop upcoming this Monday from 1 to 2 with Deanna Nazareth. You can find that on our Facebook events as well as the signups that you did for this workshop as well. And that will be a photography workshop. So looking forward to seeing you then if you can join. But yeah, thank you. And thank you for supporting Scarborough Arts. Hope everybody—
Thanks so much, everybody.
Yeah, thank you. Have a good day.